Welcome to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis, and each week it's my privilege to bring guests that have another angle on the law that teach us something if we listen, ask us some questions, to make us think. And this is quite a treat for me because my guest today, Jack ErKilla, is a court reporter. Court reporters document accurately every word that goes in a record, and they do a great job. When I started out, they had a shorthand pen and pad. It's gotten more technological, but the accuracy and the honesty and the integrity of it is so important and so different than how the litigants and sometimes the judges and the lawyers remember it. I think thousands of books should be written by court reporters because of their accuracy and objectivity. But today's guest, while he has had a great career as a court reporter, that's just one small bit of the 94 years he's had. And I'm jealous of him. He's at this table and he's younger than I am. And his name is Jack ErKilla. Welcome to the show.
George, glad to see you again.
Well, Jack, you were here in Oshkosh about how many years?
41 or 2, something like that.
And you came from the Twin Cities, so tell us how you ended up in Oshkosh.
Well, I went to college there for court reporting, and my first job was in St. Louis. And I went to St. Louis and did not like St. Louis. And over Thanksgiving, my wife and I went back to Minneapolis. I called the prof up and said, "Can I meet you?" And he said, "Sure." And we met downtown where all the court reporters hung out. And he said, "Oh, how do you like St. Louis?" And I said, "I don't." And he said, "I thought so. How would you like to go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin?" And I said, "Find out a map, get a map and find out where it is." And of course, it was only a couple hundred miles away. And that's how I wound up there. We called them right from the bar. We called the office and talked to them. Well, I knew I had the job because they had called 4 times trying to get a male reporter experienced. And he said, "I don't have any." And he said, "Well, how about a male reporter not experienced?" He said, "I don't have any." And so then when I walked in, we called. Well, I knew I had the job. They had been looking.
And who was the judge?
Judge Lexinger.
Well, didn't you have another coincidental meeting with a member of that family in Florida?
Yes, in Venice, Florida, where I retired to. I was out walking one day and down the streets of Venice, and this car pulled up, and this woman rolled down the window, and she said, "I'm lost. Can you tell me where the library is?" And I said, "Yes, go back and 1 block and turn, and you'll run right into it." And I had a shirt on that said Oshkosh. And she said, "Oh, you from Oshkosh?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, my husband was from Oshkosh." And I said, "Oh, what was his name?" And she said, "Lexinger." And I said, "Well, that's the first judge I worked for. That's why I went to Oshkosh. I worked for his dad." So she said, "Give me your telephone number and I'll call you, come over and meet," which we did eventually. So
now you worked for multiple judges here in Winnebago County. Who were some of them?
It was Lexinger first, and well, Lexinger got very ill, and Judge Miller stepped in for a while, handling both courts, and then Jim Sitter was elected, and then Arnold Kane, and then Judge Arpin, and then last but not least was Judge Hawsey. Should never forget Judge Hawsey.
No. Well, that's quite a variety of characters.
Yes.
Herb Miller was a interesting, opinionated, common sense guy who'd never gone to law school.
Right. He worked in a gas station. He knew a judge in Menasha, and he would, the judge, his attorney, and he would let him come up and study his books. And then went and passed the bar.
And Judge Hazy was one of my partners.
Yes.
And a barber shopper.
Yes, well known. They're all gone. All five of them, six of them have passed away now.
And I think it would be absolutely true for me to say that being in court, Judge Arpin's court, with you as the court reporter, George Contos as the bailiff, was a joy.
Yeah.
I sometimes did it for free, but I that just was a joy. You know that justice was going to be done, but it was such a pleasure to work with the personalities that worked so well together. It was a privilege.
You know, and the funny thing about it is you mentioned George. Well, the White House Inn, Jimmy's White House, that was his dad who started that. And George ran it for years. It was one of the most popular restaurants in the area. And George owned property all over the place, but his love was the bailiff. He loved being the bailiff.
Well, and he should have been in Hollywood because he was the perfect bailiff.
Yes.
He kept track of the attorneys, the witnesses, the parties, the court. Rita Voigt, wasn't she one of the clerks in there?
She was a
Oh,
clerk, yes.
what a joy. I haven't seen her in years.
They're alive and kicking in Ripon in the house they bought from you.
Yeah, she promised I'd get it back, but I don't believe her.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But let me throw this back. It was always a joy when you came into the courtroom, and especially on a trial, because, well, a lot of attorneys don't have a chance to try a lot of cases. They're busy with other things. But when you stepped into that courtroom, it was a joy for me because it was run so perfectly. I tell you, yeah, you were one of the great trial lawyers.
Well, thank you, but I wish you hadn't said were. I had a trial this Monday, and we're going to take our next break so you can get your thinking together. And when we come back in the second session, I'm going to ask you to repeat just some of the things that you and your wife, Mary, did for Oshkosh in this area while you were here. Court reporting was important, but that was one of many contributions. And I want to remind people, and I want to let people know, if you know somebody who knows Jack ErKilla, you tell them Jack's back in town and he's at Evergreen and he's running out of friends because he's 94 years old. We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis, and Jack ErKilla is my guest, and I am so delighted to have him here. He's a court reporter, and we're going to hear a little bit about that. 10 years in Venice, Florida. He came back, and he's at Evergreen. Tell us about Evergreen and how it works for you.
Well, I'll tell you, they're the nicest people in the world. As you walk in the door, there's an information. Well, they're doing a lot more than that. But two women who will greet you with the greatest smile. You ask for anything, and they will try to find it for you. And they come in to clean my apartment every Friday, and the gals that come in are cheerful, and you wouldn't think, my word, they're working and they're smiling. But everybody there is just great. And in the restaurant, they've got my little Russian girlfriend, and she's always smiling too. I don't know why, because I'm there. That's terrible. But they're just the greatest people in the world, and actually the tenants are awful nice also. So
how about the food?
Food's good. Food's good. It's reasonable. They have you can get the one special. As you get older, I don't eat as much as I used to, so I sometimes get the special, and it's a half a sandwich and soup and salad and coffee for $5. Wow. So I get that quite often, but no, it's great. It's great.
Jack, I think it's important. I know you haven't asked me to do this, But I want you to tell folks some of the many things that you and your wife Mary did in your years here in Oshkosh, because you were a worker, a contributor, and so was she. And you got some recognition. Just tell us about some of the jobs you held and for how long, and some of the honors that you received when you were retiring and going to Venice.
Yeah, let me correct the one thing. It was 20 years in Venice, not 20,
Wow.
not 10, yeah. Anyway, yes. Going back, I was in the JCs, president of the JCs. They named me Outstanding Young Man of the Year. The next year, the chamber named me, and Mary, Outstanding Citizen of the Year. The next year, they came out with the book Outstanding Citizens of the Fox River Valley, which I was included in. Then the Oshkosh Northwestern came out celebrating their 125th anniversary, went back 125 years to the present day then, and named 125 people over those 125 years who made Oshkosh what it was today. I was fortunate enough to be named one of those also. So,
one of the biggest things that I learned when I came to Oshkosh was that this was the location of Miss Wisconsin.
yes.
And you were a big part of that very big, successful, well-recognized organization. Tell us about that participation.
It was interesting because the Kenosha had the franchise and were giving it up. So anyone who was interested would notify Atlantic City, and they would send out, well, it was Bill Moncrief, who was a field director for them, came and toured the cities that had asked for it. And I know Madison was one of them, and there were several others. And so I had stepped away from the JCs from the Miss Oshkosh pageant. We ran the Miss Oshkosh pageant. And so he came, and they came to me and said, would you meet with him? And I said, sure. So I walked in and handed him a paper and said, if I ran it, this is how I would do it, right down to how many stamps I would need and where I'd get the money from. So he called me later and he said, the rest of them entertained me. You told me you could do it. And so they gave us the franchise, which I was the executive director for the next 13 years.
And lots of hours.
Lots of hours.
Lots of hours. So court reporting was a full-time job, but it was
Yes.
about a third of the service that you were providing in this area.
Right.
And your wife was right there by your side, as I recall, and a delightful lady, and unfortunately, she didn't have your longevity.
No, her parents did, but no, as I always mentioned, we kidded back and forth, who would die first? And we basically knew I would, because my parents made it into their 70s. Her dad and mother were 96. Her uncle was 103 and a half on the Iowa farm with his 80-some-year-old retired daughter. So
you're doing something right, or you're cheating.
No.
Well, I think that it is a wonderful blessing to have your health, your intelligence, your vitality, and your mind. And yet we're seeing that happen with many people today. I think being lucky, being careful, and taking care of themselves. But I am amazed. I am very impressed, and you are very blessed.
Yes.
And you're still contributing, aren't you?
Yes.
Now, how are we going to let your friends, and there aren't many of them left, but how are we going to let your friends know that Jack is back and he's available?
Just give a call. My phone is not too far away.
And you're at Evergreen.
And I'm at Evergreen.
And
yes.
you're no longer playing basketball against me at the Y.
No. That's one reason why I am as old as I am. I quit playing against you, even when we were on the same team.
Well, nobody ever accused me of being a basketball player. I went in and I got my 5 fouls and I sat down. But it was my football background.
I had just mentioned to you, we were scrimmaging before the season started, and we were playing together, and all of a sudden, somebody took a shot and the ball was coming off the backboard. In my mind, I already had the rebound back in the ball, and just then, crash! Almost caved my chest in, and I looked and I said, no, George, we're on the same team. Don't kill me. So,
well, I went to Roy Buck, my orthopod, and because a couple of these fingers weren't straight and they were flopping around, and he said, well, let me x-ray them. He said, just as I thought, they're fractured. Let me x-ray the other hand. I said, there's nothing wrong with my other hand. He said, humor me. And he x-rayed then, and he said, they've all been fractured too. But I was a farm boy, and if you got hurt, if you bled, you got to stick your hand in the grease pail. And that was as close.
Was a cure?
That was as close to a doctor as we would see. We're going to have to take our second break, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about your observations of the legal system, and I can't wait.
Okay.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis, and my guest is Jack ErKilla, and this is going much too fast for me. I was just talking to Jack during our break. He's won some speed awards as a court reporter, which doesn't surprise me. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, they have a contest to just determine that you're a good court reporter, and which I had. And then at national conventions every year, they had a speed contest. Actually, they had 2 speed contests. One was running, and the other one was to find out who was the world's fastest writer. And they would give a test for a literary at 220 words a minute, and then for legal opinion, that was 230 words a minute, and then at question and answer, that was at 280 words a minute, not counting question and answer, because you have to write that a question is being asked and an answer is being given, but that's not counted in the word count. So anyway, and I had that. I won the award for that, and I wasn't the fastest, close, but I wasn't the fastest. And then I was also president of the Wisconsin Court Reporters Association for 2 years. I had the Iowa Award of Shorthand Excellence, where they give you speed caps and law questions, and I have that award. And yeah.
And things go so fast in many trials. Witness talking, judge talking, lawyers arguing, and the court reporter has to get it all straight. Yeah. And so accurate, and it's so respected that the court reporter can be called to testify in a follow-up level of the case that this witness didn't say X, this witness said Y, and it's admissible in evidence. It has always amazed me, and as I said at the beginning of the show, I think that court reporters should be required to write a book about their experience, whether they want to make it a funny book of some of the crazy things that happen in courtroom, or whether they want to make it an educational book for the legislators as to how we can improve the system or criticize the system. I think that court reporters are the most accurate people that I know, and I don't want to talk anymore in this section. I want you to give the people your observation of how you felt the legal system was serving the public or not serving the public when you were a court reporter.
Well, if I can tell one speed thing on court reporting, we had a hearing going on, and we had a young doctor on the stand, and the district attorney was examining him, And as they were going along, they'd get a little faster and a little faster. And then the defense attorney jumped up and said, "Your Honor, I object. They're talking so fast, I can't get it, and I know the court reporter can't get it." And it was Judge Haase looked down and he said, "Well, let's find out. Read it back." So I read it back, and to the point where, "Judge, Your Honor, I object. They're talking so fast, I can't get it, and I know the court reporter can't get it." and Haase looked down at me and smiled and winked, and he turned to the doctor and said, "Slow down a little bit, doctor."
Well, what do you think of the system that you dedicated your career to?
Well, I of course, not involved that much. I do remember when I first came to Oshkosh, and I was there for a while, Perry Mason had just started on TV, and I loved that, and I'd watch it, but I'd sit there and say, no, you can't do that in court. Perry Mason was not a lawyer, he was a solver of crime. But it's tough for the lawyers. You walk in and you never sometimes know what they're going to say. When I was in Venice, I was called for jury duty. And of course, I knew, number one, I wouldn't be called. But anyway, they were examining us, and the lawyer for the defendants was going through, and he got to me, and he said, "I see you were a official court reporter for 39 years. He said, "You've probably heard more cases than myself, the district attorney, and the judge." And I said, "Probably." And so, but the attorney said, "Now the defendant does not have to testify. So if he doesn't, don't hold it against him." This one hand goes up, and he said, "Yes." And he said, "Why wouldn't he testify?" And the attorney said, "Well, no, he doesn't. He has the right. He doesn't have to, but you can't hold him against him. Is that okay?" Hand goes up again. "Why wouldn't he testify?" So that's the things you run into. So what do you say? So anyway, I know I was, and he was kicked off also. So.
Do you think we're doing justice to people who go to court, usually because something bad, unexpected has happened in their lives? They have disproportionate ability to write a check. Are we serving justice, or is this just one more segment of our society where money talks and controls the game?
Well, I think money will always talk and sometimes run a game, but technically, no, it's good. The lawyers serve a good purpose. You're a subject of that. My son was a corporation attorney. He just retired. But the attorneys come in trying to do their best for their clients. And I give a lot of credit to that. It's not easy sometimes. Sometimes you can get some wild clients, as you know. But no, I think the system overall is good and does serve the purpose. Do we go astray sometimes? Of course. But on the majority, I think we're in good hands.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm comforted to hear it, because you don't have to kiss anything at this stage of life. You've fought the battle, you've fought it well, you've never been hesitant to give your opinion, and you're smart. I congratulate you on how smart a life you've lived. I envy some of it, but it's my own fault if I have to admire it from a distance. And I just think it's so great to see you at age 94, as sharp. You've got a lot to offer. We want to tell everybody who's still around to remember when you were here rowing the boat, that you still can row the boat, and call Jack ErKilla. He's at Evergreen.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Jack.
Right.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Public service is the price we pay for the privilege of the time that we get to serve here on earth. Death eventually harvests all of us. We don't know when it's coming, but we do know when we wake up in the morning we're alive. And we can ask ourselves, what's the most important thing I can do if this is the last day of my life? The guest you heard from today, Jack ErKilla, has lived 94 years with that motto. What an example. Thank you for the example, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.